YouTube sites he's been on over the last 6 months. Please give a big hand to Mr. Bob Gleason. Mr. Bob Gleason's up next. There you go, Bob. Happy Friday.
Cocktails, I say cocktails. Oh, on that note. Thanks, Amos. And hold your liquor. Let it sink in. No, Doc and I always would talk about the pressing issues, social issues of the day. And Doc was raised in Mississippi, and when you grow up in the Deep South, you do observe discrimination. And Doc did, but people were discriminated and weren't being served because of the color of their skin. So I thought Doc would like this joke about a guy that walks into the bar with his pet alligator on a leash, and he gets up to the bartender and he says under his breath, he goes, "Hey, do you serve attorneys here?" The bartender says, "Yeah, of course we do." He said, "Oh, that's great." He said, "Would you bring me a cold beer and bring me an attorney for my alligator?" So here's to Doc, and here's to Beat, and here's to you. Yeah. Cheers, cocktails, I say. Now you'll notice I have in my hand a canooper, which is against my better judgment, because for years I have always said for 30 or better I would never. We always have participation, folks, here. we have the situation where I forget what I was going to say, and that's never good for anybody. But no, cocktails has been a very important. Drinking has been a very important part of my life, and I'm not necessarily proud of that. My father didn't drink until the early 50s. He was in his 30s before he had a cocktail, and it started when he was bartending at a little brick bar on Main Street in Arlee called the Log Cabin. Aptly named, I'm sure. And great stories about the Log Cabin. In fact, there are great stories about growing up in early life in Arlee on the reservation. And I think one of the cutest stories was my birth story. And my mom was 9.9 months pregnant. And she went rushing into the den in the afternoon, and she said, "Billy, put your martini in a go glass." And he goes, "Why?" And she goes, "We've got to get to the hospital as soon as possible." And he goes, "What's wrong?" And she said, "My scotch and water just broke." Now, so I have been involved with alcohol since I was a child. Now, a lot of you that know me won't believe this, but there was a time in my life when I didn't have a drink for 11 years.
No way.
Yeah.
What?
And then I turned 12. But my dad was a drinker, but he also was a sage. He also had some very wise things to say. And lots of times I attributed those things to him, although famous people had said them well before that. So, for example, he was the chairman of the school board when a woman came up to him after one of the meetings and said, "Bill, you're drunk." And he goes, "Yes, ma'am, I am, and you're ugly, and tomorrow I'll be sober." But I think some of these things were original to him. And he said to me one time, he said, "Son, if you ever have a problem and you get an attorney, you have two problems." And I went, "Okay, that makes sense." But he also told me, he said, "Son, always buy the biggest guy in the joint a drink. And when he leaves, you say, 'And stay out.'" Well, that could kind of work so well to a point. But I was at the Long Branch one time with two big loggers from Salmon, and when they left, I said, "And stay out." Well, they came back, and I bought drinks for them all night long. But I can remember during the heyday of the oil patch, I was in Watford City, North Dakota, at the New City Bar. Then there's a guy that walks in who's an easy 6'8", and his stocking feet over 300 pounds. And he sits down next to me, and we start having a conversation. And then after a while, I said to him, "Hey, can I buy you a cocktail?" And he was a little taken back at first. And then he said, "Yeah, okay," because I told him about what Dad had said. Always buy the biggest guy in the place a drink. And when he left, I said, "And stay out." Well, he ducked back through the door and he laughed pretty hard. So ever since then, we were pretty good friends. So one day, I was in there with him. He was sitting on one side of me, and a guy equally the size of him was sitting on the other side of me. And it was a sea of roughnecks and pipe-laying people like Tim Robeson. And they're tough sons of guns. And I stood up. And I stood up so I was really tall. And I said, "It takes a goddamn big man to kick my ass." And then I sat down between them and I said, "But it doesn't take him very long." I'm Bob Gleason, that's my time.